Everyone saw a fifth-round pick and moved on, but here's what they missed. PFF ranked Keith Abney II as the 50th best player in the entire draft. Brad Holmes got him at 157. That is not luck. That is exactly what Brad Holmes does. All that and more coming up next on Motown Exile. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Motown Exile, Detroit sports anywhere Exile takes you. My name is Ryan Relkin. I want to thank you all for joining us here today on Motown Exile, where we are going to take a deep dive into the Detroit Lions' fifth-round draft choice, Keith Abney II, out of Arizona State. He was the 157th player taken in last week's NFL draft, and there are many experts saying that this might be the steal of the entire draft. Now, before I get into why I love this pick so much, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of why this is such a special choice for the Detroit Lions. Pro Football Focus had Keith Abney ranked as the 50th best player in the draft. 50th best player, period. Not best cornerback, not 50th best defensive back, 50th best player, period. On most respected draft boards, Keith Abney was going in the second round, yet somehow he lasted until the fifth round. Now, let me pull up the slide here. That is 107 picks after PFF said he should have gone. 107 picks. That means every single team in the league had at least 3 full rounds to grab this guy. Most of them passed on him twice. So the question I want to answer today is simple. Was this a steal, or did 31 other teams know something Brad Holmes didn't? Because here's the thing. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior, and Keith Abney's tape tells a very specific story. But before we get into the tape, let me give you the numbers that stopped me cold in my tracks when I saw them. In 2025, his final season at Arizona State, when opposing quarterbacks threw at Keith Abney II, here's what happened. Completion percentage against him, 44.4%. Passer rating when targeting him, 46.1%. For context, an average NFL passer rating is around 90 to 95. A passer rating of 46 is what you get when a quarterback is essentially playing blindfolded. That is not a coincidence. That's a lockdown corner. PFF gave him an 86.3 overall grade and an 85.3 coverage grade. People, those are not fifth round numbers. Those are starting cornerback numbers. He was first team All Big 12 and first team All American in 2025. Not second team, not third team, first team. He made 21 pass deflections and 6 interceptions over his career at ASU, and he started 26 consecutive games. 26! That's durability. That's reliability. That's the kind of guy that doesn't miss when his team needs him. Athletically, 4.45 in the 40-yard dash, 4.38 short shuttle. The man can absolutely move. Now, here's something I really want to highlight because I think it speaks exactly to who this person is. Keith Abney II was a national champion speed skater. He won the 2017 USA Roller Sports National Championship, and then he gave up skating entirely during COVID to focus on football. Let that sink in for a second. This guy was elite in a completely different sport at the national championship level, perhaps Olympic level, then walked away from it to bet on himself in football. That's not normal. That kind of competitive discipline, you cannot teach that. So why did he fall? Penalties. And size. He is an aggressive cornerback. He plays physical, he plays with edge, and that edge sometimes gets him flagged. That is the knock. That is why 31 teams took a pass. But here's my take. That aggression, that is also exactly what makes him special on tape. Now let's talk about the culture filter, because you know that I think about this every time the Detroit Lions add a new player, whether it's through the draft or whether it's through free agency or a trade or any means. I always think about the culture filter, and I think Brad Holmes does too. And it is always about fit for the Lions. Dan Campbell's culture, Brad Holmes has a great character assessment. This franchise has been building something very special for years now, and they're not going to let any one player or any one person come in and ruin that. And that is exactly why they went with Keith Abney. He's got something to prove. If you think about it, the Lions have another star player on their team on the other side of the football who was also a late round pick and also took names to remember all the players who were drafted before him when he was finally selected by Brad Holmes. Do you remember his name? Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's who. So what did Keith Abney say when he got the call from the Detroit Lions? Well, let me read you the exact quote. "The weight don't even matter, man. I'm glad to be a Lion. This means everything. Great program, great culture, great coaches, great people. I'm just blessed to be here." Exilees, that is kneecap biting vocabulary there from Keith Abney II. And I don't think it was any accident that the Detroit Lions made this pick. Now, Brad Holmes said in his press conference following the draft that they actually could have taken him in the 4th round early when they took Jimmy Rolder, but they decided to roll the dice. And when he was still there in the 5th round, they snatched him up right away. And I think you can see why, based on the statistics, the measurables, the non-measurables. I mean, this guy's got it all. If anything, like I said before, he's a little bit aggressive sometimes. He can take penalties at times when maybe you don't want to see him take penalties, but the guy has some intangibles. First of all, the Lions love great athletes. That speed skating statistic just blows me away. How many guys in the NFL have ever been speed skaters? I mean, that's crazy. And he was not only a speed skater, but he was a really good one. A really good one. The Lions love athletes, and at minimum, they added a really good athlete to the team. But I think they also got a guy who's going to contribute right away. Hey, real quick before we get back into it, if you're a Detroit sports fan living in exile, no matter where life has taken you, this channel was built for you. Every week, we break down the Lions, the front office moves, the draft decisions, honest and grounded, no hype, no hot takes, just for clicks. If you're not subscribed yet and you're a Detroit sports fan living in exile, smash that subscribe button right now. It really, really means a lot to this community. All right, now let's get back to it. Now, I just mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I want to show you something interesting. So if Keith Abney's watching, Keith, feel free to use this if you haven't already made a list of your own. But Amon-Ra St. Brown famously had a list of players. I don't know if he still carries that with him, of all the players who were drafted ahead of him in the NFL draft. And a lot of people might have looked at that as overconfidence, as a guy who maybe thinks he's better than he really is, but I don't think you can argue anymore that Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the best football players, period, in the National Football League and one of the top 2 or 3 wide receivers in the National Football League. The guy usually catches everything. He had a rough year last year, but I think he's going to bounce back strong. And he's a guy that has a competitive edge. He plays hurt. He does all the things that the Lions want to do. He always plays like he has something to prove. Now, looking at this image that's on the screen for you, I want you to take a look there. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 players drafted before Keith Abney II. 12. And I'm not saying that any of these players didn't deserve to be drafted, okay? But I am going to tell you that based on the stats and what's Brad Holmes say, the tape doesn't lie. I don't think the tape lies, and I know the data doesn't lie. And Keith Abney belongs on this roster. He is an absolute steal. Absolute steal. He is going to play, and he's going to play often. And you're going to see him maybe early on getting some spot duty, maybe only on special teams. But you watch as the year progresses. Maybe they have some injuries. You know, maybe Terrion Arnold gets hurt and they need to go to somebody. And in those situations last year, they went to Amik Robertson. And I loved Amik. But to be fair, Keith Abney II has more skill. He's more gifted. He's got more talent. And based on the list I just showed you, he's got the chip on his shoulder too. So I'm excited to have him on the team. Think about it this way. The Lions didn't have a 3rd round draft pick. And they traded up in the 2nd round to get Derek Moore. For all intents and purposes, based on PFF as the 50th best player in the draft, Keith Abney is a 2nd or 3rd round pick. It's almost like they got 2 2nd round picks. Again, by definition, it is an absolute steal for the Lions. So what's the verdict? I'm going to say this again. The Detroit Lions get a solid A, if not an A+ on this pick. Not because it's a feel-good story, not because he was cheap, because the tape backs it up, the character backs it up, and the situation backs it up. A guy with an 86.3 PFF grade, a 44.4% completion rate against him, first team All-American, 26 straight starts, a national champion in completely different sport, someone who walks into a press conference and talks about culture, energy, and team with no prompting from Brad Holmes. This is a diamond in the rough pick. That is Brad Holmes doing what Brad Holmes does. So on that note, we're going to say goodbye for now on Motown Exile. If you liked what you saw, please slap that like button. Also, please subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by June the 1st. We'll see you next time here on Motown Exile, Detroit Sports, anywhere Exile takes you. See you next time.